Hi everybody, welcome to today's recap. Today we're going over day 5 and day 6 of the tournament. We have two completely different days, but fighting chess all throughout, but the results are completely different. So we're going to start off with round 5. I'm going to show y'all a brief overview of the games, and then we're going to jump into today's round, which was round 6. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. As a little reminder, these are game in 90 minutes. Each player gets 30-second bonus from move 1. You have to hit move 40 to gain an additional 30 minutes. Okay? Okay, let's go. This game, I'm actually really excited to show y'all. This is between Grandmaster Tanjani versus International Master Nurgil Salamova. Y'all, this game, when I saw this game, I almost shed a tear. I was just so excited that they were playing this. So E4, C6. The Caro Kann. Salamova is back to her roots. If you guys don't know, she's normally a Caro Kann player, but she's been playing the Petrov, which she normally doesn't do. But I'm assuming probably just from her trainers, like that's what she wanted to add some, additional things into her repertoire. But for the first time in the tournament, we get her playing a Caro Kann, and I could not be more excited. I love playing against the Caro Kann. I love it, especially the way that Tanjani plays it. In the advance, y'all, I saw this and literally was like, oh, today's my day. Today's my day because I get to actually watch what I play and watch a GM play it and some of my favorite players. So cool. Okay, so E5, let's just jump in. C5. This is the second most popular move. Normally, the move is bishop to F5. This is the main line to try and get the bishop out so that you can play this move and you have your bishop outside of the pawn chain. But this move is also fine. It's the second best move. And so she plays the move that I like to play. She plays d takes C5. And this is probably the most aggressive way you could play this. And it's going to depend on how Salamova is going to respond. She responds with the immediate E6. And so after E6, actually, Grandmaster Jesse Cry says, in this position, we must smile as white because you've basically tricked black into playing a French. They didn't want to have this bishop here. You know what I mean? They wanted to get this bishop out of the pawn chain. And the French is basically this. And the only reason that people play the Caro is so that they get their bad bishop out, or they trade it. And so that's why people play the Caro. But now you're playing a French structure and you just have to smile as white here because now they're going to have a really hard time fixing that light squared bishop. So I saw this and I was so happy because I actually could prep out the moves from here and I was like, oh wow, I actually understand this position. What's going on? Because normally these people play like these positions that I have no idea. They're so good. They play like, Roy Lopez, an Italian. I don't really know the ideas behind those positions, but this one, y'all, I understand this one. Sorry. I just really need to say that. I felt so good watching this game. Okay, so knight f3, bishop takes c5, black gains their pawn immediately back, and white is totally fine with that. Bishop d3, developing her king side, and then knight to e7, knight b to d2, and knight b c6. Knight b3, attacking the dark squared bishop immediately. That is black's good bishop. She slides it away. She doesn't want to trade that, obviously. And so we get castles, and now queen to c7. Queen to c7 isn't super popular, and so here, Tanjani thinks for a little bit. So she plays bishop to f4. I like this move, defending basically the e5 pawn. The whole idea in a French structure, which is basically, or I should say maybe, I guess, an advanced French structure. No, a French structure, is having pawns here and a pawn here. And what everybody is trying to do is basically fight for the e5 square. White wants to control the e5 square and black has to basically not let them. So those are the ideas. Everybody's fighting for that one square. Okay, so knight b4, and now a4, a6, queen to d2, attacking the knight. Knight trades for the bishop. And c takes d3. I like when, personally, black trades my light squared bishop because, honestly, that bishop can't ever fight for e5, whereas the knights for black can fight for e5. So it's always like, well, now I have an extra piece, in that these three can fight for e5, and you only have, technically now, 2 that can fight for e5. So we get this trade, and now I actually really like this move. The computer didn't love it, but I think it's really fun. She plays d4. And this is a very active move. She's basically trying to say that she's going to get her pieces active at the cost of a pawn. It's a very active move. It's not super intuitive either to the position, but now her pieces are going to gain activity. So we get a5, kicking the bishop, bishop a7. She takes the pawn, castles, rook fc1, queen d7, bishop e3, and now queen to d5. After f4, it looks like white has just like a really nice position, but black has basically retained equality. And so bishop d7, finally the bishop is going to get to do something. And so rook c4, rook f to d8, rook a to c1. And black's pieces are at least working. They're doing a job. And before, her light squared bishop was kind of trash. So at least they're doing something. Bishop b5, look at the bishop go. Look at them do something. The rook moves out of the way. And now knight c6, we get a trade of knights. Queen takes e3. Bishop takes c6. And we're going to go into this position for basically knight versus bishop. And also, Tanzania is still up a pawn, so she has to kind of prove that it's worth it. Also, Salamova's kind of edging into a little bit of load time. She has 15 minutes. It's only moved 24. So we get queen c5, and we get a queen trade. And then in this position, basically, it's going to fizzle out into a draw. I know, I was very sad too. Even though, because she's basically able to regain her pawn, and so now it's kind of just like, okay, we have the same amount of rooks, same amount of pawns. And also Salamova had like no time here. She had like a minute, and she played some pretty good moves. And the position turned into a draw, so a little sad there, but you know, it's fine. Actually, the players go on for a while. But this is just a draw this whole time. White is basically just going to keep the king from ever really moving away from this side because they have to watch this pawn. And so, and then the white king is basically going to go and harass the rook. So she promotes, the king takes, and then the rook is just going to cut off the king forever. And even though she's up 2 pawns, she can just win them on her next move. This is actually where they decided on a draw. But she can just take this, and then she's going to get this pawn eventually. And that was the game between these two. Very exciting beginning of the game. And these positions are always really fun to watch. As a viewer, I love watching these types of games. But it ended up being a draw. Salamova held on. She created chances with pushing her d-pawn and giving it up for activity. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, pretty quick draw between these two, and on to our next game. Yo, this game is crazy. This is between Grandmaster Lei Tingjie versus Grandmaster Katarina Lagno. Let's just jump into it. We have Lei with the white pieces. She has yet to get a win in the tournament, so I'm sure that stings. She's playing with white. She wants to get a win. We get an Italian, and after bishop e7, castles, castles, bishop to b3. She's basically sliding her bishop out of the way so that when this comes, she's going to basically create a square to move her bishop away, which is exactly what happens. And she gets to play bishop to c2. And now c5, rook e1, knight c6, going back because the whole point was basically to attack the bishop, and now that it's gone, the knight has done its job. Rook to e8, b4. And Lei decides to play on the queen side. She could have played on the king side as well. She had more options, but she decides to play on the queen side. And now a6, knight b to d2, h6, h3, bishop to f8, moving out of the way of the rook, bishop to b2. And this game is starting to get a little complicated. Knight to h5, and now knight to f1, knight to f4. That knight gets a beautiful square. Knight g3, and queen to f6. And here comes in Lagno. Still, it's pretty equal. If anything, there's a slight advantage to white. But after d4, and the center's about to blow the hell up. Like, e takes d4, c takes d4, c takes b4, and now a takes b4. And everything is going crazy. There's a lot of threats in the air. This is threatening to push with the discovery, and you would win the knight. There's a lot going on. And so she plays knight takes b4, and now bishop to b1. And the bishop on b1 basically sucks, and also lays down a pawn. So she's basically going to have to figure out how that's worth it. I think she has dynamic equality. If anything, she's maybe a little bit better still here, just because her one, she has these beautiful pawns, and then she also has these bishops. Maybe you can debate that they're a little bit more active, especially because e5 is going to come and blow up the center, and the bishops are going to become really strong, whereas these bishops are pretty much not doing much. And so a5, defending the knight. This was important because if you don't do anything and you play something like bishop to d7, this is just an example move, now she gets to play queen to d2. And this is really nice because she's attacking this, and you would basically have to go back, and after you go back, she gets to play e5. And after d takes, and white would be just completely winning because there's really nowhere that the queen can go to defend this knight. So she would have to play something like knight takes h3, because if you go back this way, like, that doesn't really work. Or actually, sorry, just take that. So that doesn't work. So she would have to play something like this, and that's not great. You know, you go for like probably king to h2, and then after queen to f4, you just try and hold on. And she would probably just play something like this and not allow anything, and then this is still hanging, and there's a lot going on. And you're also threatening mate, so completely winning position. But they don't go into this. Also, playing rook to a3 is also a really nice idea, with the threat of swinging your rook over one, and then also defending your knight, because you do want to play queen to d2, but you can't play it here because of this move of knight takes h3. And now once you take back this way, black gets to take here, so the knight wouldn't be defended. So the rook also has a purpose if you play rook to a3 and defending that knight. But okay, we don't see this. We see bishop to c1 and knight to g6. She just moves the knight out of the way. She's like, nope, I'm good. Knight to h5, attacking the queen. Queen goes to d8 and bishop to d2. Bishop d7, and now d5. Knight to e5. It's not very clear the specific plan that Lei was supposed to go for. Is she supposed to push e5? Is she supposed to push d5? It's not super clear. And when you're supposed to do that as well, because it's very important, the timing of it. And so now knight d4, queen to h4. And now Lagno actually has a nice position, and she has the advantage because she's up a pawn, and now all of the threats from earlier are kind of neutralized, and she's just up a clear pawn. So after knight g3, g6, and we're basically in a Benoni right now. Like, it just looks like a Benoni with the pawn structure, with basically this, looking like this. And so after bishop takes b4, a takes b4, and we get a trade of rooks, and after queen to b3, bishop g7, and knight d to e2, which looks pretty natural. You know, you're defending your other knight, you're bringing another piece to be able to defend on the king side. Now, Lagno plays such a gorgeous move. She plays bishop takes h3. Here it comes. And the only good move here is queen takes b4. Because if you take this bishop, it's going to get really bad for you after queen takes h3. You can't take back, basically. And now here she plays queen takes b4, which she basically creates very practical chances for herself. Because after bishop g4, moving out of the way, saying, okay, I won a pawn, I'm pretty happy. Now queen takes d6. And after h5, now queen to c7, b5, d6, and she's basically saying, I'm going to promote my pawn, and everything's going to be okay. And honestly, they both had no time. This is move 34. Lei has a minute and a half, and Lagno has like 7 minutes. So they were both in time trouble here. And so Lagno plays knight to c4, and after queen b7 attacking the rook, now her advantage is starting to go down. She plays rook to d8. And after queen takes b5, Lei is able to get a pawn. And after knight takes d6, now they're just equalized. And after queen to b3, bishop to e5, Lagno still is pressing. She still has a little bit of an advantage. Lei is under a minute. She has not hit move 40. It's move 37. Queen to d5. Queen to g5. And Lei plays this with like 30 seconds on her clock. She plays knight to f4. Knight to f5. And I think this is a really nice move. Lagno has like 2 minutes, and she plays knight takes f5. This was very complicated. Here she needed to play... Oh, it's so difficult. She needed to play bishop to f3. Because after bishop to f3, you can't take because of the pin. And now knight e to g3, and this is such a hard thing to evaluate, and I think she saw this and was like, okay, I don't have time, and I just need to trade pieces. because here she is winning after bishop to c3 attacking the rook, knight to h6 check, queen takes, rook e3, bishop h8, g takes f3, bishop e5, and after queen takes, knight to c4, and after queen to c7, rook d1 check, and king to h2. Black is just winning here, but this is, who can see this with a minute and a half on their clock? So she just plays in this position, knight takes f5, and she lets Lei back in the game with queen takes e5, and now the game is back to equal. And after a trade of queens, we get this position, and the players agreed to a draw. Crazy game. I think Lei did a really good job turning the game into complications. She took the D pawn, or the B pawn, and then she took the D pawn. And I think it was really nice. I know Lagna was probably beating herself up after this game, where she can't complete the win, and I know that that's really rough. And this is another game, I believe, that she couldn't complete a win, and another game for Lei where she saves it, where she should have been lost. So crazy game by these two. It definitely should have been a win for Lagno, but Lei created chances, and she was able to hold on for dear life. Master, oh, sorry, just kidding. GM elect Grandmaster Vaishali Ramesh Babu, who is playing with the white pieces versus Grandmaster Anna Mosichuk. And we get e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. We get an Italian, which we get very, normal moves up until this point, where we get queen to e7, castles, and g5. g5. This is a very committal move. Sure, everything is technically equal according to an engine, but practically, this looks a little wild in front of your king, especially if you want to castle this way. So, and especially now that you don't really want to castle queenside either, now that your a pawn is pushed up the board. So, we'll see, okay? So, she has to prove that she's going to be okay. Bishop g3 and castles in this game is turning very sharp. Also, Vaishali, more time than she started with. And Anna is down 20 minutes on the clock. So, I think definitely Vaishali should be happy here. After rook e1, bishop to g4 pinning, knight to f1, bishop h5, knight to e3, bishop takes, rook takes, king g7 stepping up, queen b3 coming over to the queen side, knight defends the pawn, and now h3, knight to d7, d4, f6, and basically the structure is very closed, and we get a trade of pieces, we get a trade of queens, and now f3, knight to e6, and the structure is very closed. If anything, maybe black has a little bit of an advantage here. After knight c4, rook e2, and we get rook a6, d5 attacking the knight. And after knight f4, she basically has to trade because that knight is just going to be a beast if she doesn't. And after this trade, we're starting to see now a semi-open file on the g file. Knight c1, the king moves back, knight d3, rook g7, and after b3, knight b6, and basically the players are just very equal. Vaishali, though, has 3 minutes, and she's only on move 30. She has to make another 10 moves, and Anna has about 11. So c4, knight d7, and we basically get a shuffling, and she ends up playing g4 with, like, less than a minute on her clock. And I think she was maybe scared of f5 coming eventually. So she plays this move, and after en passant, now she plays f4, h5, and she locks it up, and now h4. And these pawns can be a menace. This is a passed pawn. And Anna is also up a pawn because she won the pawn earlier with en passant. So now it's like, well, now Vaishali just has to defend, and she has like no time. So we get this position, and the players hit move 40 here. This is move 40, and she actually should not be trading knights here, but she does. And it was on move 40. And now we get a trade. D takes c5, and now Anna's just up a clear pawn, and she's going to have to find a way to break through. They have hit time control. It is move 41. We get rook d3 and a doubling on the d file. And it's hard to kind of see how black is going to make progress here. White would love to walk over here and take these pawns, but it's always scary of a rook coming here and then a rook sliding up and coming and mating the king on the h file. Oh, over here, you know what I mean, this way. Sorry for the bad arrows. And then so we see rook 1 to d2, And now c takes d5, e takes d5. And I think this is the moment where it was a critical position, because when she plays this immediately, it's not super great. Another idea I think that would have been better is just playing the immediate b5, because after b5, say a takes b5, c takes b5, and if you take here, she's gonna win the pawn back with just the immediate rook to b6. There's no way to defend it, and it gets really spicy. So she can just play here after this, or sorry, this is the, say it was like this. She can just play rook to a2, and then after, say if she wants to take like this, like that's fine. She can control this pawn and it would be okay. And this would be a draw. But here she has to play like rook a8, because this isn't going anywhere, and if you take, it's the same idea. So she can't ever really take, and then it would be like this. And this would be a lot better for Anna, but this is hard to find. And instead she just plays c takes d5 immediately, and after e takes, rook g8, rook to g2, and rook to g5, and the king is just going to come up here, and there's no way for, basically, for black to make progress. And they agree to a draw. And so this is the third game in a row that Anna Muzychuk blunders a winning position into a draw. So really tough for her. I think this tournament would be looking completely differently if she would have won any of the last 3 games. She's had winning positions in all 3 of them. She just has not been able to finish it off. And so this game ended in a draw, very surprisingly. All right, our last game, I'm not going to pretend like I know everything that's going on, because I don't, okay? This is between Grandmaster Konoru Humpy versus Grandmaster Alexandra Goryachkina. So we have Humpy with the white pieces, and we get a Queen's Gambit. And we get into this crazy-ass position with... It's gonna look crazy, y'all. The board is going to open up. We get knight takes d4, knight c6, and after this trade, we get a trade of queens, which you're like, oh, early trade of queens by move 12, draw. Yeah, it's gonna get a lot more complicated than that, because bishop takes c6, f3 defending her pawn, and after bishop c5 check, king to f1, king to e7, and Humpy plays e5. And I love this move. She's basically able to push her back, and now after the knight moves out of the way, we get to see bishop to g5 check. And f6 you would love to play here, like, okay, great. f6, I'm gonna basically break down your center, but she actually doesn't even need to move her bishop, because after e takes, rook to e1, and this is such a nice move, because what are you gonna do from here? You can't take me. If you take me, I get to play this, and after you move out of the way with, say, like king to f8, I take your bishop. And so she wouldn't be able to go into this, and she would have to like go into like probably like this position, where after bishop to h4, white is just much better. So instead of all this, instead of playing f6, we see instead king to e8, and she has to go back, and I'm sure she wasn't happy about that. But after rook a to c1, she kicks the bishop, and now she comes back, and bishop to c2, and now g5, bishop to d2, and this is very complicated. Knight to e4 1 is a ginormous threat that black has to deal with. The position is very complicated, even though the queens are off, which you wouldn't normally think, but it's very complicated. There's 2 bishops that are on this file that white would love to try and win. So now we get a5, bishop to e4, we get a trade of bishops, and after knight takes e4, rook h to c8, h4, and bishop to b4, and this is getting spicy. Bishop to e3, sure, this is equal, but it's very low time. Humpy has literally 12 minutes, and it's only moved 24. And Goryachkina does have more time. She has 28 minutes, so she had to be a little bit happy because of that. So the knight gets to take on e5, and now rook takes, and h takes. Here she tries to play something like a3. Now f5 comes, and that's her counterplay. And so after this, she would have just been fine. So she doesn't play a3. She instead takes the pawn here. And after knight to c4, bishop to c1, defending the pawn. And Humpy plays some really nice defense. Really nice defense. She has not a lot of time, and she basically is able to save this position and hold on in very low time. She has 2.5 minutes. It's only moved 32, and she has to play very accurately. And so she does, and she's able to get out of this. This looks terrifying, because it looks like here knight takes g2 is just winning, because you're going to win a pawn. But after king to d1, the rook moving away, bishop to f2, and now bishop to h6, and rook takes b5. This is very complicated, and I think this is what Goryachkina didn't like, and it's sure objectively equal, but this would have been very complicated. So instead she just goes for f5 first, and then now she goes into this line where rook to c1 check, king to f2 defending the pawn, and we basically go here, and the game fizzles out into a draw, and the players decided on a draw here, and the game ended. So very complicated game, great defense by Humpy, and all 4 games on day 5 were a draw, when a lot of them looks like it could have been a decisive result. So you could say, sure, it's a quiet day, but I think it was pretty entertaining. There was some crazy games. I got to see an advanced Karo Khan in the candidates. I feel like I can like check something off of a list because that's just like amazing. So I think these games were exciting, even though they all ended in a draw. And now on to the most exciting day of the tournament. Today's round 6. Let's go. Y'all, oh my god, this game is crazy. Okay, so we have Grandmaster Tanjan Yi with the white pieces versus Grandmaster Anna Mozichuk. Let's just dive in. Okay, so we have d4, and now d5, knight to f3, knight to f6 symmetrical position, and we get e3, which is not normally a super popular move, I don't think, but this is what we get. And so after c5, b3, knight to c6, castles, b6, bishop to b2, and after bishop b7, basically the players are just developing their pieces. She's not letting a knight come into b4, bishop to e7, and now knight to e5. And Anna makes a questionable decision. She trades the knight. After this, so after these pawns are exchanged, e takes d4, now knight takes e5. And now this is looking very similar to the structure we were seeing earlier, where we have, it looks like a French structure, honestly, or an advanced Karo structure, and you have this really strong pawn on e5, and whenever you see a pawn on e5 like this, it's kind of a telltale sign that you have more power on the king side, because you have this really strong pawn, so you can therefore bring more force to the king side. You can bring your pieces over here. She's planning to play queen to g4, and then you can just start going for it. So that's exactly what Tanjan Yi does. We get queen to g4, and she has almost the entire time of her clock still. She has an hour and 27 minutes, whereas Anna has an hour and 4 minutes. So she's burned a lot more time, and Tanjan Yi just gets a free attack. After g6, b4 to stop the knight from coming in. This is a really, really nice move. She's not letting black's pieces get activity. a5, she's like, I don't care. Knight to f3. Here comes my pieces. And now castles. This is what I would call castling into the fire. But she really didn't have another choice. She has to put her king to safety. But Tanjan Yi is going to try and prove that her king's not actually safe. So after rook a to e1, we get a takes, rook to a8, and now h4. Here it comes. Pawn storm. She's going to throw her pawn, and she's going to try and destabilize the black king. And so rook to a4, this is basically the only move that is good defense in this position for black. This is really all she can do in this position, and Anna finds it a really nice move. After now h5, here she comes. The pawn is coming in. Rook takes b4, and one of the most beautiful moves I've seen this whole entire tournament, knight to d4. What the hell is going on? What is going on? She said, take my bishop. I don't care. Take my bishop, and I'm going to go for it. H takes. And then after bishop takes, you can't take this way because here I come. And then after king to h8, whoopsie, I'm probably just going to bring a rook in, and I'm going to mate you. So this would, and even though you're up material, you're going to get mated. So she can't take the pawn, or she can't take the bishop here. And she plays g5. And this is a good fighting chance to try and stay in the game. So she's like, okay, fine. If you're not going to take my bishop, I'm just going to move it out of the way. Fine. Okay, rook to a4. And now f4. Here she comes. And black's king is looking super drafty. There's not a lot of protection, and this knight would love to be here to be able to protect the black king, but unfortunately they have a pawn here, and you don't really want to play f6 because it's just going to create more holes in your position. It's not really going to help with the defense. So we get queen to c8, bishop to b2, moving out so the queen can't take, knight to c5, and now f5. E takes f5, bishop takes f5, attacking the queen. Queen moves to d8, h6. Here she comes. Here she comes. And Muzichuk has under 7 minutes, and Tangeni has 30 minutes. It's move 26. So time trouble is definitely here for Muzichuk. We get bishop to c8, e6, and here she comes, crashing through, f6. Like I said earlier, she didn't want to play f6 when the pawn was here, but now she's kind of trying to lock the structure, so she really doesn't have another choice. Bishop takes h7. Bishop takes h7 is, I think, such a fun move because now after king takes f7, or h7, queen to f5 check, and the king cannot take here because now here comes rook e3, the same idea from earlier, and after king to g7, you don't even need to play this move because the rook could come over, which would still be winning, but you don't need to play that. You can just play knight to c6. And the only way for black to even kind of hang on is to play knight takes e6 and just give up the queen. Which, like, who's doing that? I don't know. Nobody is doing that. So there's no way that Anna was going to play this, especially in low time. So instead, once we get bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen to f5, she plays king to h8, and she's basically hoping to use this pawn as a guard so that the white pieces can't come through. But she plays now knight to c6, and here comes that knight. And the only way black can survive is playing the same idea of knight takes and going into this, but there was no way Anna was going to play this. So instead, she plays queen to e8 with 2 minutes on her clock, and technically, yes, she is up a bishop, but her king is very, very weak. Queen takes g5 now because of the pin. This was the whole idea. And now, rook g8, and Tangeni plays here. Rook takes f6. And this looks like, oh, she's completely winning, right? There's no way she's not winning. Because, you know, there's no way. Like, she's coming to break through. Like, once she moves the rook, it'll be a discovered. Like, she can't take here because of this. So she's just completely winning, right? Wrong. This has gone from a completely winning position to now a draw in one move. The commentators were talking about this, and they were like, yep, that's chess. You play a perfect game, and then you get to this point, and you play one wrong move, one wrong recapture, and it's a draw. Here, she needed to play bishop takes f6, because now, after bishop takes, queen takes, and now king to h7, now she gets to play queen to f5 check, and after queen to g6, now you can do a trade, or you can go to queen to f7. I like personally queen to f7 check more, and after the queen takes, the pawn takes, and there's just no way to get out of this. This is just, you know, she's just going to be completely up material, and we would go into something like this, and it's just completely winning for white. And you can, here's a sample line. You can just see that she's up the exchange, and she's just going to win everything. And so this is what she needed to find, and she had time. She had like 20 minutes. Instead, she plays rook takes f6. And now, after bishop takes, she kind of realized, oh, this is not great. This is not great at all, because now after queen takes f6, it's just gotten much more complicated. After king to h7 and knight to e7, and what is going on? Black has to find here bishop takes e6, which is an insane move to find after knight takes, queen takes, and then queen to e7 check, and then queen to f7, and you block. And then after this, probably queen takes e7. Yeah, here. Or no, you can't even take, oh god, see, it's very complicated. No, you take this way, okay. And then play something like this. And this would be a draw, two pawns, rook and knight for rook and bishop. So this would be a draw. So in this position, she has to find that. After knight to e7, she has to find bishop takes e6. However, she does not find that. With a minute and a half on her clock, and on move 34, she plays rook to e4. And Tanzania pounces. Rook takes e4, and after knight takes g8, offering her queen. She says, take my queen. I don't care if you take my queen, because now I'm going to take you with a check. And after king to g6, now I'm going to take your queen. And even if you take here, I'm still going to be winning. After bishop to d4, I'm just going to win. If you try and take this pawn, I'm sorry. Here comes my king, and my king's going to be faster. And so this would just be completely winning for her. But we don't see this. We see instead queen takes g8, and after queen to f7 check, queen takes, pawn takes, and there's no way to stop promotion. And Anna Mozychuk resigned, and Tanzania gets the win. What a crazy game. Crazy game. Tanzania played one of the most beautiful games I have seen in a while. And she just made one wrong error, and Anna was able to get back in it, but it was very complicated, and she had very low time, and she missed it, and Tanzania wins the game, and she stays being the sole leader of the tournament. Mind you, she has been playing amazingly. She's been in really great form. So great game on her part. She is showing that she is here to win, and she is fighting for that contender spot. So let's see what happens in our next game. All right, next up we have Grandmaster Vaishali Ramashbabu versus Katerina Lagno, who's also a Grandmaster. We see e4, e5, and we get a Roy Lopez. We get a lot of these with Vaishali, and also just in general in this tournament. And we get this position, which is all very normal. And now this is basically a martial attack, and this can get very spicy. So we get knight takes d5, and normally the move here is, I believe, just knight takes e5. This has been played a bunch of times, but Vaishali doesn't play that. She plays d3, which is not common at all. The players at this point had like blitzed out their moves, and now Katerina thinks for a little bit, so I think maybe this could have been a surprise. She's trying to remember probably what her prep is. She plays bishop to b7, which makes sense. This is a very common move in the martial. I learned this the other day. You basically get a super strong bishop, and you're going for the attack. a4, b4, a5, and now king to h8 and d4. And so now after b takes c3, b takes, e takes, c takes, knight to c to b4. This is a really nice move. Look at Vaishali's queenside. What's going on? All her pieces are underdeveloped, and she also has an isolated queen's pawn. So this move I think is really nice from Lagno. It's basically it's opening up all of her pieces. She's opening up her bishop. She's also this is just a really nice square for her knight. And so we get bishop to c4, and now c5. Bishop to b2, c takes, queen takes, bishop f6, attacking the queen, and now we get queen to d2, and Vaishali has to be extremely careful. Her king is being hunted, and there is blood in the water, and after queen to d2, after a bishop trade, knight to f4 is coming. And this is going to get very spicy. There's the first threat in the air is she's basically threatening to take this knight, and after you take, she's going to play this, and it's going to be mate, because wherever your king goes, whether it goes here, there's going to be mate here, because the knight covers this square, and if you go here, it's the same thing on mate on g2. So she has to be very careful, and there's only one move that saves the game. And this move, I think, is the most insane computer move that I've ever seen before. Rook to e3. This move, I think, is... Who plays this? Nobody plays this. You're letting the queen come back to the back rank? You're willingly allowing this? After bishop to f1 and bishop takes f3, you just take with the rook? And after knight to c2 attacking your rook, you're not even allowed to take the rook? Or you're not even allowed to move your rook, because then, guess what? You're going to get mated. So you have to basically take this over here. Instead of moving, you have to take this and then allow this? Like, that's just crazy to me. And so she would have some counterplay in threatening mate over here, so the rook would have to go back. And this would technically be equal, but like, who sees this? This is such a computer idea, and it's just like ridiculous. So I don't fault Vaishali for not finding rook e3. I think this is crazy. So instead, she plays the obvious move of just taking the free knight. Just give me the free knight. It's right there. Just give me the free knight. It's fine. Queen takes b4. And now bishop takes f3. And I think here maybe she didn't realize how strong that bishop was going to be, because now g3, queen to d4. She moves the rook out of the way. Rook a2. And now, ooh, here she comes. Knight to d3. Ugh, what are you going to play? Your queen and your rook are forked. And Vaishali plays a move which makes a lot of sense. She plays rook to d2, and now knight takes. And this looks great. You're like, okay, 1 for 1, it's fine. But now she gets this beautiful fork, and she's, not only is she up the exchange, she now, Lagno, is going to pin the bishop to the rook. And this is just completely losing. And in this position, because Lagno is going to win a piece, Vaishali resigned. And what a crazy game. Lagno pounced. Super crazy attack. The defense was like insane. Nobody's going to play rook e3. I just think that move is insane. Whew. Spicy game. Vaishali is taken down within 29 moves. All right, so our next game, we have International Master Nurgul Salamova versus Grandmaster Alexander Goryachkina. We have the top seed and the bottom seed of rating-wise coming into this tournament facing off against each other. So let's see what happens. We get a Catalan, and basically the ideas behind this position is white is going to have a really nice light squared bishop, and black is going to have to fight against it. So castles, d takes, queen to c2, a6, a4, bishop d7, and after she takes the pawn, bishop to c6 to fight along this diagonal, which is the idea I was saying earlier. And now bishop g5, knight b to d7, bishop takes, and knight to c3, and queen to d6. And this is where we start to vary from the main line, I think, with queen to d6, or at least from like the most popular moves. Rook a to c1, rook f to d8 makes a lot of sense, fighting along the d and c files. And now rook a to c8, e3, and we get this structure, which looks pretty equal for both players, and they're gonna have to decide where their breakthroughs are. So queen to c7, knight to d3, and after bishop d6, queen to c2, a5, bishop g2, rook to e8, and I think Goryachkina can be pretty happy here. She's basically equalized with black, and that's mostly what you want at this level when you're playing with black, is you can be happy with a draw. Knight to c5, g6, and I actually really like this idea of g6. The idea is basically to bring her king and then slide her rook over and just start hammering away on the h-file. This is a very King's Indian-esque type of idea. I saw this and I was like, oh yeah, this is something a King's Indian player would play. I love this type of thing. So rook b1, she basically wants to play b4. And after queen to e7, rook d c1, h5, and after queen to e2, Goryachkina is coming down the h-file. She said, I don't need to move my king and bring my rook. Here comes my h-pawn. I do not care. b4, a takes, a5, h takes, and rook to a8, and she's going to win that pawn back. And after rook takes b4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and rook takes queen over here. And now rook takes c5, and after this trade, Goryachkina is just up a pawn. Salamova is not able to get her pawn back, and now Goryachkina is going to have to prove that she's better. Salamova has also 7 minutes. It's move 34. Goryachkina has 30 minutes. Queen to d6, queen to b6, and also keep in mind, Goryachkina has a passed c-pawn. So if she can get this pawn to promote, she'll be totally fine. So we see knight g4, queen to c7, queen to f6, no queen trade. Queen to f4. Okay, fine. I guess I'll queen trade now that it benefits me. G takes. Rook to a8. Bishop to f3. And this is pretty equal, even though she is up a pawn. It's just still pretty equal. Everything's fine. Knight to f6. Rook b6. She defends the pawn. King to g3. King to g7. Finally, the king comes to g7. King to h4. And now rook c2. King g3. And they're just kind of shuffling. And it's now turned from equality to Goryachkina actually having a nice position and an advantage. They have hit move 40. This is move 45, but Salamova is still very low in time. She has 13 minutes. Goryachkina has 41 minutes. Time is a piece, y'all. Like, seriously, like, this is going to be a huge factor. She's not going to get any more bonus time. She's going to have to hold until Goryachkina says draw. So king to e7, rook b7 check, king steps up, bishop g2, knight to h5, and now this is not great. This king blocking this bishop is not good at all. f5, and so she's like, okay, I guess I'll just move, and bishop to h3, and this is a huge blunder. Huge blunder, because after knight to f6, she's going to reroute her knight to be able to go and attack this pawn. So we see rook g7 attacking the g pawn, which makes sense, but after knight to e4, rook takes g6 check, and the king just attacks the rook. The rook has to move away, so she's like, okay, fine, I can just defend over here, like, it'll be totally fine. But after king to f6, here comes the pawns. What are you gonna do? And so it's getting very precarious, and there's just literally no way for Salamova to hold this. And after c3, rook takes, and c2, Salamova resigned because there's no way that she's going to be able to stop the pawn. And Goryachkina turned this into a win. She really pressed, and even though she was up a pawn, she had to prove that she could convert the position, and she did, and she found the win. And a really nice game from her. Great on her, and she gets the full point. Yo, this next game. So we've had 3 decisive results so far, and this is my favorite game out of them all. I don't want to spoil it. Okay, we have Grandmaster Humpy Konoru with the white pieces versus Grandmaster Lei Tingzhe with the black pieces. Lei has not been doing that well in this tournament so far. She had some miracle saves in some of her games, and she had some horrible blunders in some of her games to where she should have drawn the game and she lost, and then she should have lost the game and she drew. So she's been having a very crazy tournament. She has still not gotten a win. Let's see how this game goes, y'all. Okay, d4 starting us off, and d6. I could have literally started crying when I saw this. I was jumping out of my chair. I was literally like, a King's Indian defense. Thank you. We get an amazing game. Like, this is fighting chess at its peak. This is what I want to see. Every time I see d4, I want to see d6. I don't care about the Queen's Gambit. I don't care any about those positions. I don't want a Grunfeld. I want a King's Indian, and I want it now. And I get it from Lei Tingzhe, and she's providing the fireworks. Knight to c3. This is a very normal position. Everything's normal. Yada, yada, yada. Everything's normal. Until this move. After d5, knight e7, king to h1. And this is not a very normal move. This is very rare. I've personally never seen this, and I play the King's Indian all the time, and this is a very normal structure. I've never seen this move. It's basically just a waiting move, because in the King's Indian, it can get very spicy on the G file, because once black plays f5 and opens up the board, the G file can sometimes also open, and the rook can slide over, the bishop gets out of the way, and it can get crazy on the G file. So sometimes the king is just better placed on the H file. And so Lei's like, okay, fine, king h8, I'm gonna do that too. That's fine. You wanna do that? I'm gonna do that too. I'll wait for you as well. Knight to e1, rerouting her knight, knight d7, and now knight to d3, f5, here it comes. This is the break. You're allowed to play this in the King's Indian. You're allowed to push for f5 when the center is locked, because your king is more safe. There's not really going to be a break in the center to open up the board, because if this wasn't locked and say the pawn was here on d4 instead, then you can open up lines, you can take, and everything can open up, and the king would become way less safe. But with the center locked like this, you're allowed to play f5, and this is the main idea. And now she plays f4. She's like, you want to fight for the f-file? So do I. E takes, bishop takes, and now she plays h6. Another idea here, she could have just gone for the immediate bishop takes c3, which the commentators were also talking about today. They were saying how this position, it just would have been nice for black, and she could have gone with this. But instead she goes for h6, which I think is totally fine. And now c5, and she wants to break it open. She would love to break open the center. She thinks her king is safer. F takes e4, c takes d6, c takes, and now knight takes e4, knight to e5. And we get a trade of bishop for knight, and after rook takes f1, we get a trade of rooks. And it's gonna get spicy. After d takes e5, d6. Here comes the pawn. She doesn't care. Konoru is basically gonna have to hold on to that pawn and prove that it's a asset versus a liability. And so now knight to f4, and Lei's like, fine, I'm gonna put my knight here, and it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna try and destabilize your support of this pawn. I'll probably play here and try and attack your knight so that I can eventually take this pawn. So we get this, which is very similar, but she doesn't end up playing bishop to f5 yet. She plays b6, and after kicking this knight, now she plays bishop f5, and after rook c1, rook b8, we get knight b to d2, rook to c8, rook to c3, and now bishop to f8, and after knight to c4, this looks crazy. And of course the computer's like, equal, this is totally equal, guys, like totally fine, just shake hands, like the game's over, it's totally equal, I can defend this. But on a practical level, as a human being, this looks insane. As a King's Indian player, this is exactly what I like to play, but also then I get into these positions and I'm like, why did I do this to myself? Why didn't I play something super solid? Like, this is like crazy tactics. And Konoru has 4 minutes. It's move 26. 26. She has to hit move 40. Lei has 17 minutes. She plays bishop to g7. After knight to e3, rook takes, b takes, bishop takes, and we get a trade of pieces. And after knight to b5, queen to d3, defending the pawn. And now knight takes d6. She had to give up that pawn. And then she gets to take this pawn instead. And after queen to f6, h3, bishop to f8, both players down to literally no time. Lei has 4 minutes. Humpy has 1 minute, and it's move 32. And it's also a very complicated position. Like, there's still queens on the board. You're not really sure where you're supposed to go. You have to be very accurate. Knight to d5, attacking the queen. Queen to f2. I love this move. I think this is a very active move. She's attacking this pawn. She's coming into the king's safe space over here. And after queen to e3, queen takes, knight takes, e4, and knight to f5. And the game is starting to turn. The tide is shifting because Konoru played this literally and has 50 seconds on her clock. Lei plays knight to b5, and now what are you gonna do? This is very troublesome because now once you push c4, now knight to c3, and this pawn is falling. So what the hell are you supposed to do? And so we see this, and after king g1, she gets to win a pawn. And Lei has won a pawn. Somehow she has won a pawn, and now she just has to win. King to f2, both players still no time. Move 39, they both have under 2 minutes. a5, and knight to g3, attacking the pawn. She's trying to win it back immediately. And after a4, it doesn't matter. Take the pawn. My pawn is gonna run, and the knight's gonna come and try and hold the game, but it's very difficult to do, and there's no way for her to be able to save this position. They have hit move 40, they have gained extra time, it's move 43, but it doesn't matter anymore. Humpy already blundered in low time, and after knight c3, bishop to c2, a2, that pawn's going to promote unless you do something about it, and when you play knight to b3 to basically protect the a1 square, now bishop to a3, and then the bishop's going to come in, and you're going to have to sack a piece basically for the pawn, which is better than being a queen down, you know, than her promoting and getting a queen, sure, but it's losing regardless. And after king to e3, bishop b2, c5, b takes, and there's just nothing that white can do. And in this position, Humpy resigned, Lei Tingzhe wins her first game, and we had 4 decisive results. So we had a day yesterday, all draws, and today, 4 decisive results. Bam, 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 bam. What a crazy game. It was completely equal until Humpy blundered in low time. That definitely hurts when you play a really nice game in a King's Indian where you equalize up until, 30 moves into the game and now you have low time. And that's, I think, what the King's Indian player plays for is like completely crazy positions. You want intricacies and you're going to get them. And so, wow, what a crazy game. What a crazy day. 4 decisive results. We still have Tan Zhongyi leading the tournament. Let's go to our standings. So, these are our standings. We have Tan Zhongyi with still leading the pack, 4.5. We have Alexandra Goryachkina at 4 points. Oh, sorry that this is still here with the names of... I forgot to change that. It's fine. It's fine. We're at the end of the video. You're looking at the results. It's fine. So then below that, we have Katarina at 3.5. And then we have Lei at 3. She has bounced up with that win. And now Nurgil Salamova at 2.5, as well as Vaishali. And then Humpy and Anna Mozichuk at 2. I did not expect this. I feel for Anna a lot. She's had a very difficult tournament. She has had 3 games where she should have won them. And then she just lost this one. Rough day for her. And we shall see where tomorrow takes us. We're not even halfway through the tournament. We're getting close, though. And Tan Zhongyi has been staying in the lead this whole time. So she's been showing that she's on form. And I think she has a really good chance to win this, which... I don't think she was a lot of people's favorites going into this tournament to win. So she's been showing out, and we shall see where the rest of these rounds take us. I will see y'all for round 7 coming up. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the crazy games that came from them, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.